So one of the most important decisions you have to make at the very beginning of the process is what do you want to focus your dissertation or your thesis on. And this is really fundamental because it's going to frame your whole period of time, 8-9 months of working on your dissertation. So it's a really, really important decision. So what I want to talk to you about in this video is how do you generate ideas about what that topic might be, and how do you organise your ideas and make a decision about which is the one that you're going to focus on. So let's start by generating ideas, because it can be a little bit daunting when you're starting at the beginning thinking about, well, how do I know what I want to do my dissertation on? So I have 6 different ways or sources that you can use to try and help yourself to be creative and come up with the idea that's right for you. So number 1 is that you should see if there's a list within your department of suggested topics, because often academics will come up with suggestions of topics that they think have potential for dissertation or thesis research. Now you might look through these lists and say, well, there's nothing here that interests me, but it doesn't have to be something that specifically is on that list that interests you, but looking through those topics may also generate other ideas for you that you think, oh, I'm interested in sustainability, for example, it's on the list, but I'm interested to take a different angle on it. So you're reading these lists as a way of creating ideas for yourself. So that's number 1. Number 2 is to look at past dissertations and theses that have been done, and you'll access them usually in the library or online. Now obviously you can't do the same dissertation or thesis that has been done before, but why this is useful again is just looking through the titles or looking through those documents gives you ideas of the sorts of things that people have looked at or how they frame their question or their idea. So again, it can just be a prompt that generates an idea for you, or even just narrows down your focus of saying, oh yeah, I'm definitely interested in this aspect or this theme, so that'll help you. So that's a good thing to do too. Number 3, and perhaps the most important one, is read. This is really how you're going to identify what are the key things that are being written about in the literature, so therefore the topical things or the current issues, and allows you to think about then how you fit in, if you like, and how your work is going to fit in with this. So I would say consult widely in terms of reading lots of academic literature. You may also want to read reports, for example. If you're interested in a particular sector, you might want to see what's going on at the moment in that sector, and that might again trigger ideas. When you're reading journal articles, you'll often see in the last section the authors talk about potential future research, so this is a good place to look as well in terms of thinking about what interesting ideas might be being talked about now that you could explore in your dissertation or thesis. The next thing I would say is to talk as much as you possibly can to the people around you. And there's a variety of different people that you can talk to who all have different roles to play. So the first thing is family and friends. So when you're thinking about ideas and you're teasing them out, it's good to talk to people who may know nothing about it, but it's by you vocalizing what you're thinking, it can bring you to a conclusion as to whether there's potential in this or not. So voicing those ideas you're having is good. Also with other students who are in the same boat as you, it might be a good way as well of teasing out ideas and thinking about them more. And in these cases, the conversation isn't necessarily what's important. It's not that they are going to necessarily change your idea or input into your idea, but just by you talking about it, you're progressing your idea as well. Also talk to lecturers, academics, and particularly if you know that you're interested, for example, in management, then go and talk to the lecturer in management. Mostly they're happy to talk to you, and again, by you talking to them, you're thinking in new ways, and the things that they might mention might help to form your idea or to strengthen your idea, because they may be aware of whether there is potential in it or not. The other thing I would say is think about yourself. So think about your job experiences that you've had or your placement experience, because that might feed into you identifying what you're interested in. It might be that something struck you as a question when you were in your job or in your placement that you thought, I'd like to find out more about that. And that could be something very practical. So sometimes our dissertation ideas come from a practical idea which we then mould into a more academic idea, and I can talk more about that in a few minutes. So thinking about what happened in your experiences that might feed into ideas that you're interested in. And the last one then is to think about what your hobbies and interests are, because this is really important. You're going to spend a good amount of time looking at this topic, and you really want it to keep your interest. And often I see the most successful students in their dissertations are the ones that really have found a topic that is of genuine interest to them, and that has sustained them through the process. Now, where can that come from? Well, it might be that you have a hobby. So let's say that your hobby is cycling and you're a tourism student. Then you might decide that, well, I know I want to do my dissertation on something to do with activity tourism or cycling tourism or adventure tourism. So that's a starting point to which you can then start to think about theories and how you're going to situate it in the literature. But it's a good starting point. So think about your hobbies and your interests. Another way to think about it as well is to think about where you want to go in your career. So if there's a particular sector that you know you want to work in, or a particular department or aspect, then it might be a good idea to factor that in to your idea about a topic. Often students talk about their dissertation in interviews. So if you want to get a job in a HR department, then maybe it's a good idea to do your dissertation on something to do with HR, because that will be a good talking point in an interview, and also will give you a good foundation and a good basis of knowledge for the job that you hope to get later on. So these are all good ways of generating ideas. So coming up with ideas isn't straightforward. Developing all these ideas creates something like this here behind me. You can see all these plants where it's a bit wild, it's a bit lots of different ideas, and you're unsure which one is the best idea and which one you're going to choose at the end. But it's very important for you to come up with lots of different possibilities and then worry about choosing which the right one is. So to do that, you might brainstorm, you might sit down and sort of in a very focused way list all the things you're interested in. But what's very important is that you keep a record of all of the ideas that you have, because sometimes you can come across an idea out of the blue, and if you don't write it down somewhere or put it into a file somewhere, then it'll get forgotten. And sometimes having one idea, even though it may not be your end idea, it feeds into your other ideas. So I would suggest that you either get a notebook, open a new file in your computer, open a new notes section on your phone, but have somewhere where you record all the possible ideas. It's also very important to know that there's no such thing as a stupid idea. What you really want to do here is you want to think outside the box. You want to challenge your brain to think in as broad a way as possible, and to let your mind be creative and be free to come up with all of these potential possibilities. Afterwards, there's time for you to think about the practicalities and the feasibility in terms of which is the right idea. But for the moment, what you want to do is really let your mind be as free as possible to come up in a sort of wild, unstructured way. Like you can see what's happening behind me. That's the way you want to think about your creative process, in that way. So think really broadly, really widely, in all sorts of different ways. And that's the way you'll generate lots of possibilities. And from that, you can choose what the best idea finally is for you. So the last thing then is to think about, how do you choose between all of these great ideas that you've had? And I'd give a number of tips here. I think the first thing is to think about what interests you most. So when you start looking through your titles, there will be one that you'll be more interested in than the others, and that is really key. I think that's one of the most fundamental factors when you're deciding which one to go with. Go with something that's going to keep your interest. The second thing I would say is think about what you're good at. So if you have modules that you're particularly good at, that might be a sign that it's good for you to do your dissertation in, and something to do with accounting or management or HR or whatever the aspect is, and we touched on that earlier on. But do think about what the skills are that you have, because that will make it easier for you. And the other thing I would say is don't overthink it. Don't agonize too much about how am I going to decide between these things. Often the best decisions we make aren't when we sit down at a computer and say I'm going to come up with an idea now. It's much more often that our ideas will come to us when we're doing something else. So maybe when you're reading an article for a different module, or when you're out for a walk, or when you're talking to somebody else about the topic that they're going to do. That's when we get these brainwaves, if you like, which help us to decide which is the right topic for us. So to be aware of that, not overthinking, and sort of just allow yourself in the background to mull over the different options and to decide which is the best one for you. So I'll be doing another video about how do you decide when you've decided on your topic, how do you narrow it down from the broad area. So at the moment we're just talking about what your broad area is. How do you start to narrow it down and refine it a little bit? And there we'll be talking about things like the practicalities, which are important in terms of making that decision. So I have another video about, how do you know whether your research is feasible? I'll do a video on that for you. So if you want to get the videos, be sure to subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.